Hello, anybody, and thanks for tuning in to Monday Morning Handicapping. This is the premiere of my Kentucky Derby playlist. I'm going to start out by taking a look at a recent history of pace, race, and track profile as it pertains to the Kentucky Derby. I'm going to look back at the most recent 11 Kentucky Derbies. I'm going back 11 because not only are they the most recent, but 11 Kentucky Derbies ago, that's when California Chrome won, and that was about the time I really dove back into horse racing. I used to go as a kid, kind of fell out of it growing up, and got back into it the year California Chrome won the Derby. So I thought that would be a good starting point, and work our way forward to now. Also in this playlist, after this video, where I'm gonna look at the track and how the paces have been run recently, I will start to dive into some of the upcoming contenders for the first Saturday in May and start looking at horses and look at some of their races, take away some things I like, some things I don't like, point out traffic trouble, hopefully start building on some information to have an early opinion on the Kentucky Derby and who I like. I normally don't start this early, but New Year, I figured might as well start really getting into the nuts and bolts of the Kentucky Derby and what to look for, and maybe have an early selection so when the week of the Derby is here, I'm not scrambling to find a winner. I'll have an idea of the field and who maybe has some hidden troubled trips and whatnot. But before I get into those other videos, I'm going to start with this one, and we're going to start off by going through my agenda, what I hope to achieve today. First, the intro to my Kentucky Derby playlist. This will be the first video. I wanted to show everyone how the Kentucky Derby begins. I'm trying to speak to a new audience, people that are new to the sport. So I want to show everyone when handicapping the Kentucky Derby and making a pick, you got to understand how much chaos there is at the start of the race. So take your runner's running style into consideration. A lot of horses will be vying for the lead. Some get shuffled back and go to the back of the pack on purpose, or just horses cut in front of them and cut them off. But we'll take a look at the start of the Kentucky Derby just so everyone gets a glimpse of how chaotic it is at the beginning. Then we're going to view a diagram of the track at Churchill Downs and familiarize ourselves with the points of call. So this is typically every quarter of a mile. They will post fractions, the speed at which the leader is running the race, and that either sets up for horses in the front or the back to win the race typically. But just to familiarize ourselves with the track and where certain points are around the track that we will be referring to, the quarter mile, half mile pole, 3/4 mile, and so on. Again, go over the recent history, going back 11 Kentucky Derbies, check out the pace and the running styles of those eventual winners. And then we're going to wrap it up with some keynotes and takeaways that I've surmised from the information I've gathered. And for the most part, I use Equibase. That's a good spot to, or a good website to look up previously run races and the times, the pedigree, and all that. So I use Equibase for most of my information. So now we're going to start by looking at the beginning of the Kentucky Derby race, just to give everyone an idea of how important and how critical the start of the race is. So let's take a look. So here we have a field of 20. I understand that it goes up to 21, but that's because there was a scratch in this race. So a full field of 20 typically is what you see. Could be a few less, but it's not going to exceed 20. When I hit play, I just want everyone to watch the horses leaving the gate and watch how they're all going to vie to get down to the rail. They don't want to run wide into the first turn, but watch how they come out of the gate straight, and then they're all going to start crashing down and cutting one another off, trying to vie for a really good early position. So let's take a look. Just watch how they start somewhat straight, and they all just collide down to the rail, and some horses obviously get shuffled to the back. Some have to gun it to the lead and run extremely fast to make the lead. Horse on the outside looks like he's got to really go fast to try to get around all these other horses. So just something to consider when you're handicapping all the chaos at the start and your horse's running style. Where are they going to be? Are they in trouble of getting shuffled back early? But yeah, that's just the start of the race. I thought everyone should see it, especially if it's your first time playing the Kentucky Derby. So that's what that looks like. And now here I want to show everyone a diagram of the racetrack that the Kentucky Derby is run at. This is Churchill Downs. It's a 1-mile track in circumference. Here's the finish line right here. Follow my cursor, these orange and red bars. Now the Kentucky Derby is 1.25 miles. So from the finish line, they're going to go back to the start of this red arrow, a quarter mile. They're going to start here, run down to the finish line for the first time. This is the first quarter mile, and in red I've highlighted where that quarter mile marker is. The average time for the last 11 Kentucky Derbies, we'll get into my information later, but on average this first quarter mile, again when they're getting out of the gate, all rushing to get that good position early, on average they've run this first quarter mile in 22.66 seconds. And then after that quarter mile, they go around this clubhouse turn. This blue marker here indicates the next quarter mile marker. 3/4 pole indicates there's 3/4 of a mile left. This is the 3/4 pole. So the next quarter mile is run in total from the start of the race, 46.38 seconds on average. Just this quarter mile from this red tick to this blue is on average run 23.72. And I should mention that around the turns, they tend to slow down anyways. As you can imagine, they're not running in a straight line. They have to navigate this turn. So then the next quarter mile down the back stretch, on average, run in 1 minute 11 seconds, 0.03. This quarter mile alone, run in 24.65. Around the far turn, again, slows down. Typically, by rule of thumb, they slow down a little bit around turns. 1 minute 36.75. This quarter mile split 25 seconds, 0.72. And the final quarter mile, they have a final time on average of 2 minutes 2 seconds, 0.62. This final quarter mile is 25.87 on average, going back the last 11 Kentucky Derbies. So this is just a diagram of the race as we talk about the quarter mile, the half mile, 3/4 here, 1 mile, and then the finish time. This is what we're referring to. So feel free to come back and look at this for reference later on in the video if need be. And now we're going to take a look at some of the information I've extracted from that Equibase website that I mentioned earlier. So if anyone watched my Breeders' Cup video, this is very similar to that. We're looking at the last 11 Kentucky Derbies, going 1.25 miles. In this left column, we have the year of the Kentucky Derby, most recent at top, 11 Kentucky Derbies ago at the bottom. And then we average out all the times and figures across the board. So we have the year of each race here. Over here we have the track. This is the track condition. So was the track rained on? Was it fast? Was it dry, sloppy, etc.? You'll see the track condition on race day. They'll tell you if the track's fast, sloppy, wet fast as indicated in 2017. So something to pay attention to. Over here we have the quarter mile. So for each year, the time that they ran to that first quarter mile, remember that was that first red arrow out of the gate where horses are typically rushing fast to get good position. LB is lengths back, so the eventual winner of this race, how many lengths back from the leader was the horse at the quarter mile pole? A 0 would indicate that the horse that ended up winning the race was on the lead, so no lengths back basically. But how many lengths back was the eventual winner at this mark here? Quarter mile here, I have it for half mile, 3/4, etc. So you can see how the eventual winners moved throughout the race. So the split indicates the quarter mile time after the preceding one. So this quarter mile in 2024, the opening quarter mile was run in 22.97 seconds. The quarter mile after that, heading into the half mile mark of the race, was run in 23.66. The rate or difference was 0.69 seconds, and positive numbers here indicate how much more time or how much slower the quarter mile was run. So the second quarter mile was run 0.69 seconds slower than the first quarter mile. And again, same thing from the half mile to the 3/4 mile, lengths back of the eventual winner. So just take this most recent Kentucky Derby, for example. The horse that ended up winning was 4 1/4 lengths back at the quarter mile pole. By the half mile pole, coming out of that first turn, the horse was only 2 3/4 lengths back from the leader. And again, the split, so the time from the half mile pole to the 3/4 mile, that quarter mile was run in 24.68 seconds, which was 1.02 seconds slower than the quarter mile to the half mile time of 23.66, and so on throughout the entire race. Lengths back, split rate to the final times here, all averaged out at the bottom. The slow rate over here indicates on average how much slower was each quarter mile throughout the race. So on average for last year, each quarter mile was run 0.73 seconds slower than the previous quarter mile. And again, at the bottom, averages out to 0.8. So they were slowing down a little bit less than the average. So the slow rate is on average how much slower each quarter mile was run. W2W, that's wire-to-wire winners. I'll go over these highlighted sections later, but these are horses that won the race by winning wire-to-wire, meaning as soon as the gates opened, they went to the front, gotten ahead of the pack, and no one ever ended up passing them. The odds of the eventual winner, again, averaged out. The name of the eventual winner, and you'll see an asterisk here on Medina Spirit. This horse was disqualified from the race weeks or months after due to a failed drug test, but the horse on the track won the race, so I kept his times for all intents and purposes. And Country House has an asterisk because he was actually put up via disqualification of the horse that actually passed the wire first. So just something to note. If you go back, you can kind of see how the horse that Pass the Wire first there ran, but Country House was awarded the win day of. Medina Spirit was taken down later, so that's why he's still there. And the post position, which gate number the horse broke out of. This box in here is the prep race prior to the Kentucky Derby. So this is the race right before the Kentucky Derby that each of the winners ran. So Mystic Dan, who won the Kentucky Derby, the race before that was the Grade 1 Arkansas Derby. Did Mystic Dan win that race? No, he did not. Did he win wire to wire? No, he did not. Was it a top figure? So in horse racing, they do calculations and give horses speed figures, just a general gauge of how fast they run the race. And a top is the fastest speed figure in the horse's career. So was the race prior to the Kentucky Derby the best speed figure that horse has earned in his career up to that point? No, it was not. 6 out of 11 did run a top speed figure. Again, 55%, about half the field did run a top coming into the Kentucky Derby, a top speed figure. LRD is last race distance. So this is in furlongs. And for any of you who don't know, a furlong is an eighth of a mile. So 9 furlongs or 9/8 of a mile is a race that is 1 1/8 of a mile around. The Kentucky Derby is 1.25 miles. But as you'll notice, every single horse that won the Kentucky Derby in the last 11 tries, their most previous race before the Kentucky Derby was run at 9 furlongs. So something to note there. You probably want a horse coming out of a 9 furlong race. DSLR, that's days since last race. So before the Kentucky Derby, how many days was the race that each Derby winner ran? 32 is the average days that the horse ran its last race before the Kentucky Derby. As you can see, some as low as 21, some as high, it looks like 48, 35. But on average, they run about a month prior to the Kentucky Derby, the eventual winners do. Pedigree over here refers to the pedigree of the horse, the lineage where the horses are born and bred. The sire refers to a horse's father, the dam sire, so basically the grandfather on the mother's side. As you'll see here, there's 2 into mischiefs. Other than that, no duplicates. Same on the dam sire, no duplicates. And comments out here, this red bar was the COVID year race, 2020. This race was actually run in September when typically the Kentucky Derby's run in May. There was a delay with COVID and all, so I just want to make note of that. The young horses had a few more months to develop. I don't know what kind of impact that had overall because all the horses had that extra time, but I just want to make note of that. And again, down here, the horse I was put up via DQ of a horse named Maximum Security because around the far turn, entering the stretch, the horse caused some mayhem and was ultimately disqualified. Now I just want to go back and talk about what I highlighted over here. As some of you may know, Rich Strike was an 80-1 shot that won coming from near last, if not last. And I just wanted to point out when horses come from last, typically there's a quick pace. And I was comparing the fractions of these races where horses came from back, as you can see early on, 10.5 lengths and 17.25 lengths back at the quarter-mile pole. The fractions of these races quicker than the average across the board. Same at the half-mile pole, much quicker than the average at the half-mile. And a second in horse racing is very significant, so it may not look like much, but it really adds up. Horses still 13.25 and 17 lengths back at this point. Again, quick fractions to the 3/4 miles, but as you can see, lengths back has shrunk, so the horses are starting to pick it up. I just want to point that out. So if you are handicapping and suspect a quick pace, quicker than the average, you might want to take some horses coming from further back of the pack. As you can see, they've really rallied from far back late. I mean, with a mile to go, a horse had 2.25 lengths to make up. The other one had 7.5 lengths to make up. So just something to note if you look at the times. Quicker races tend to favor horses from further back in the pack because the horses in front are going to get more tired as the race goes on. The blue highlighted sections are the 2 wire-to-wire winners. And as you can see, the opening quarter, both were slower than the average. So the horses got to the lead and were able to slow it down a little bit. The rate that it's slowing down is lower than the average. So they started out slower and were able to kind of just maintain that slower pace early. Again, if you look at the times here, how it compares with the average, a little bit slower. So you got the slower quarter mile, slower half mile, and the rate is still going pretty evenly. Not slowing down a whole lot, but not quickening up by any means. And it stays at or around average. And I think what's key was that opening quarter mile going slower than the average and then just able to kind of cruise at it and maintain its speed throughout led to these 2 wire-to-wire winners. As you can see, the slow rate here, they were slowing down less than the average of 0.8 because they were able to run a little bit slower early, so they had more energy late in the race, so they weren't slowing down as much late. The other thing I noticed was that the 2 wire-to-wire winners were both sired or fathered by a horse named Into Mischief. So Just something of note to consider. I will leave a copy of this file in the link in the description. Anyone wants to look at this and just come up with some angle for themselves, I will again leave a copy of this file in the description below. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over and look at some key takeaways. So keynotes and takeaways, the average Kentucky Derby times by quarter. I'm just going to leave these up here for everyone to reference. We've gone over them and they will be in that file that I'm attaching. 2 of the last 11 Kentucky Derby winners, 18%, were won wire to wire. So not a high percentage, but eventual winner was behind the leader 4 1/4 lengths or less on average throughout the race. So this is per quarter. The eventual leader on average, this isn't each individual race or the horse that came from furthest back, but on average the eventual winner at any point in the race was only 4 1/4 lengths back from the leader at any point. 9 of 11 or 82% of the eventual Kentucky Derby winners made the lead by the quarter pole. So if you go back to my diagram, with a quarter mile left in the race, which is at the end of the far turn, at the end of the green arrow, entering the final stretch for the final quarter mile, 9 of the 11 Kentucky Derby winners we looked at had the lead at that point. So you kind of want to have a horse with some late kick and able to make that move around the far turn, which is something we'll look at when we start looking at replays of contenders. When handicapping, consider potential pace scenario. If scenario appears to have lots of fast front runners that may run quicker than the Kentucky Derby average, consider some of those contenders that have shown ability to close from behind. Again, that's what the green highlighted section in my Excel file was talking about. If not a lot of front runners, see if one of the few with that running style stand out as superior and appear to be able to manage speed around the average Kentucky Derby times. Consider past performances, who they've beaten recently, as well as pedigree. So that was that light blue or magenta colored cells in the Excel file sheet. When they're able to kind of get a soft lead early, they can just cruise at that speed. Again, look at their past performances as well as their pedigree. If you see another Into Mischief horse and there's not a lot of speed in the race, give that one an extra long look. I know I will. 9 of the last 11 Kentucky Derby winners, 82%, had their most recent start was either in the Arkansas Derby, the Florida Derby, or the Santa Anita Derby. So 3 for each of those races. Their most recent race before winning the Derby was in one of those races. 6 of 11 Kentucky Derby winners, 55%, won their most recent race before winning the Kentucky Derby. 6 of 11 of the Kentucky Derby winners ran a top speed figure in their most recent prep before the Derby. So again, for horses that haven't run their top speed figure in their most recent race before the Derby, go back and look at the race where they did run their career top speed figure and see if that looks good enough to beat the field today. And maybe if there's any reason why the horse could improve today, they can actually improve from their career top speed figure. Because about half the field ran a most recent top and half didn't. So it's kind of either or. So go back and look at those tops and see if the race shape or conditions match what they're running at on Kentucky Derby Day. That's basically highlighting what I just said. 3 of 11 of these prep races, 27%, were won wire to wire. So only 2 of the 11 Kentucky Derbies were won wire to wire. 3 of the 11 were won wire to wire. So a little bit more, which makes sense. It's probably softer company and also a lot less traffic can happen. Again, at the start of the race of the Derby, lots can happen. If a horse is a step slow, that could really cost them the entire race. So can't emphasize enough how crucial the start of the race is. All 11 100% most recent Kentucky Derby winners had their most recent race prior to the Kentucky Derby at 1 1/8 miles. That was at 9 furlongs. I was really emphasizing. Because it's 100%, I really thought that I wanted to really bring that home. Kentucky Derby winners' most recent race before the Kentucky Derby was on average 32 days before the Kentucky Derby. It's not imperative, but the Derby winner usually has about 30 days in between its last race and the Kentucky Derby victory. Into Mischief is the only sire to have more than 1 Kentucky Derby winner in the last 11 years, and there were no repeat dam sires. And again, both Into Mischief sired horses won wire to wire. So definitely something of note. I hope everybody got a little kernel of information that is useful for their handicapping process. As we get closer to Kentucky Derby, throughout the next few months, I will be looking at some top contenders, checking out their replays, seeing if any of this information fits, making notes on how the race was run, if they ran into any traffic issues, things I like, things I don't like in terms of visualizing the race. Anyways, I hope everyone liked the video. I hope someone got something out of it. I'll again share the file for everyone to do some of their own homework. Please leave a comment if there's anything I missed, misstated, something I should have pointed out. But I thought this was a good introduction to the Kentucky Derby, looking at the race and the track as a whole. So that's pretty much it for this video. If you would, please like and subscribe, share with friends, share with people who might be interested in getting into horse racing. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Good luck, everybody.